Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the Kreeger cast. I'm your host, Patrick Kreeger. I'm joined today by Christopher Gillen.
What's up? That was amazing. I can't believe... I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that.
I'm getting better at it.
Alright, fair enough. Oh, man. Alright.
So what are you here to talk with us today about?
Alright, I'm going to set a scene for you.
Okay.
Imagine you're on a yacht.
Okay.
And you're listening to music.
Unfortunately, I can already think of the song.
What is that music called? Yacht rock.
So that's what your text was about.
Yes.
I didn't understand it.
That's what it was about. Okay. Here's the thing. I maybe 6 months ago, stumbled onto a podcast, called Beyond Yacht Rock. And it is a podcast made, these four guys sit around and make up musical genres, and then, count down 10 songs in that genre that they just totally made up, and it's really, really funny. It's not really, it's not about the music, it's about the jokes that you're making about, trying to create these arbitrary genres, to connect songs that aren't connected in any way at all. It turns out that podcast is based on a web series from 2000, I want to say 2005 or something like that, that these guys all wrote and made together. And
how do you do a podcast about this?
Okay, I'll get there. But so they made a web series, and it's they're all on YouTube. They're 4-minute long videos about this genre that they made up called Yacht Rock. And the show is called Yacht Rock, and there's 11 episodes or something like that, and it's filmed very poorly, intentionally. It's supposed to look bad.
Well, that was also pretty early.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. But I mean, it intentionally has this bad yellow filter on everything, and it's just hilarious. But so the point of this was that they're all a couple. I think one or two of them are actual music critics, wrote for All Music and Rolling Stone or something like that. And they know a lot about music, and they noticed that there was sort of this group of musicians who recorded in Southern California in the late 70s and early 80s, who all made music that sounded extremely similar.
And they were not involved with the punk scene at all?
Right. It's so I'll get into what defines yacht rock in a bit, but this is kind of how they created the genre, got the idea for the genres, that they noticed that all of these musicians were making the same music, but not only were they making the same music, they were all making that music together. Incestuous is a weird word, but that's kind of the relationship that these people had together. They were all co-writing songs together. They were all recording on each other's albums. They all shared the same producers. And it was just this weird sort of this thing that became yacht rock, and it was just this thing that they decided to do, just to make, they sort of did it to make fun of it, but also to to sort of get it out there, because it's not really music that it's not music that really pushes the boundaries. It's not innovative. It doesn't inspire people to make new kinds of music.
So it's kind of like Muzak?
Sort of, yeah. It's just it's the music that those people wanted to be making. Okay, so let me lay down a definition for you of yacht rock. Kenny Loggins is one of the yacht rockers. He's one of the people that this
I know the name, but I can't place music.
Okay. Songs by Kenny Loggins that you would know include the soundtracks to Caddyshack and Footloose.
Oh, okay.
Neither of those two songs are yacht rock songs, but that's what Kenny Loggins was doing at the time. Those were both made in that era. Kenny Loggins, 2 years ago, was actually interviewed about this thing. So let me back up. Yacht rock was invented by this group of guys who I've been listening to their podcast. That idea was invented, but it's like sort of spread and is now like people like know the term yacht rock. Like that's an established thing that people know. And there's a band called Yacht Rock Review that's based out of like Atlanta, I think, that like tours around the country and like plays covers of all these songs, and like they make a living doing this, so it's kind of popular, and it's like it's a thing that people know. So Kenny Loggins was giving an interview in like 2016, and the interviewer asked him about yacht rock and asked if like he'd ever seen the web series Yacht Rock or like had heard of this stuff, all this stuff, and Kenny Loggins like seemed like he was kind of offended about it, and then was like trying to ignore the question or like not talk about yacht rock and not call it yacht rock, but then laid down the perfect definition of yacht rock, which I think is really funny, just the irony of that, him trying not to talk about it. But what he said was, quote, "It's the term that embraces the period of pop music where we sort of channeled into a kind of smooth jazz kind of thing," which is very Kenny Loggins sentence. But that's sort of the thing. It was pop music at the time. We sort of would define it as like classic rock maybe today, or like it's closer to like soft rock kind of thing. But at the time it was pop and is heavily influenced by smooth jazz, the sort of smooth R&B that was sort of the direction the R&B was going at the time. It's characterized by like a really smooth sound, and the only way I can describe that sound is by telling you to listen to it. And if you listen to it, you'll hear it and you'll be like, wow, that's smooth.
Do you have some recommendations on particular tracks to listen to?
Yes, I do, and I'll get there.
Okay.
So specifically, the other definitions or the other things that define yacht rock are the era that it was made, which is almost exclusively 1976 to 1984. There are very few yacht rock songs that were written outside those years.
Okay.
It is there's a couple other characteristics that generally define yacht rock are the song lyrics, not necessarily specific lyrics, but like the stories or the narrators tend to be like a sentimental fool, but sentimental without being like love lettery.
Okay.
It's not a song. It's not a song like it's like a sultry like let's make love kind of song. It's a song that says like or the narrator of the song or the subject of the song is this person who like thinks they're a romantic but they're not, or something like that. Generally, but that's not always the case. There are obviously specific things that are different, like different lyrics. Yacht rock is not necessarily about boats or sailing or the water or anything like that. But there are a couple. Sailing by Christopher Cross is like one of the earliest like yacht rock songs, which obviously the song is called Sailing. It's about sailing. So there's some other stuff that we can get into while we keep talking, and I remember, but particular bands that sort of defined the genre were the Doobie Brothers at the time, whose lead singer was Michael McDonald, and Michael McDonald is kind of like the progenitor. He's the genesis of yacht rock. This is like, he's known for having a really smooth voice. He plays piano and like was doing this like electric piano thing, so it's not as like clunky and percussive as a grand piano, which was like sort of the thing that you used in rock at the time, or like other people were using like Hammond organs, which is kind of like, if you've ever been able to recognize an organ sound on a rock and roll track, that's a Hammond B3 organ. It's the only one anybody ever used. But Michael McDonald was doing this more like, it wasn't piano, it was keyboard, specifically electric piano. So it's smoother because it's not percussive like a piano with the hitting the strings. It's an electronic instrument. So the Doobie Brothers, and there's a very important characteristic of yacht rock songs called the Doobie bounce, and that has to do with like the like poppiness of the bass and the drums together, like give it this sort of jazzy swing kind of thing. So that's called the Doobie Bounce. The other thing that really defined this was that like all of these guys who were doing it, with the exception of Kenny Loggins, pretty much were session musicians.
Well,
That's
okay.
how they started out. The band Toto is really well known for like some of their other songs that are really harder rock, but Toto 4, which might be their most famous album, it's the one that has Africa on it.
Wait, so this is going to be a really dumb question. Toto isn't a person.
No, Toto is a band.
Okay, I always assumed it was an individual person.
No, Toto's a band. But so yeah, Toto 4, which is like the quintessential yacht rock album. Almost every song on it is pure yacht. But Toto started out as just a bunch of session musicians. All of those guys weren't in a band, but they all worked at, these recording studios around Los Angeles together, and were like, let's get together and make a band. That's important because those guys were used to writing and playing with a bunch of different people, and that's sort of how this whole thing came together, is in the sense that like the guys who were in Toto knew the guys, specifically Walter Beckett and Donald Fagen from Steely Dan, who's another important yacht rock band. They knew the guys from the Doobie Brothers and knew Michael McDonald, and when Michael McDonald joined the Doobie Brothers in the mid 70s, they did stuff together. They knew Kenny Loggins because they played on Kenny Loggins stuff. They knew a bunch of producers for a bunch of different things, and like that's kind of how all this stuff came together. And so because they knew all those guys and they were session musicians, they could just go in and play other people's music or co-write other people's music, and that's like how the yacht rock scene started. So it was like, it's Michael McDonald era Doobie Brothers, Toto, Steely Dan a little bit. Steely Dan is like kind of proto yacht because they were really early. Like their heyday was earlier than the Pocket, but like they have a couple albums, Gaucho and Asia, which came out in like the late 70s, early 80s, that have pretty yachty songs. There's a song called Peg on, I don't remember which album, but that's pure yacht. It's so good. There's a bunch of other session musicians, producers, that are in the yacht rock scene that, if I could remember them off the top of my head, I would list the names. Jay Graydon's a really important one. Bill Champlin. I'll keep going when I remember them.
That's fine.
Yeah, like, and so all these guys just wrote music together, played music together, and it all sounded the same, which I think is funny, because it wasn't like, I don't know, it just didn't push the envelope, but somehow these guys just did this thing, and it was just like, this is what we want to do. It wasn't, all professional music is made to make money, obviously, like, that's these people's living, but, like, you gotta understand that Kenny Loggins, at the time, was doing movie soundtracks. I mean, he wrote the theme songs to Caddyshack and Footloose, and those are rock and roll songs. They're as far away from yacht rock as you can get, and he did that at the same time as recording, like, his album called Celebrate Me Home, which is almost pure yacht rock. It was his first album after the end of the Loggins and Messina band, when Jim Messina went off and did whatever Jim Messina does, and Kenny Loggins just had a solo career. Kenny Loggins was making money by doing like outside projects with other producers, and just wanted to make yacht rock because that's the music he wanted to make. He just wanted it to be like this smooth jazz. That's the thing he wanted to play, so he did. The thing that makes yacht rock so good, I think, is that because all these guys knew each other and were all session musicians and were used to that, particularly with the producers, Ted Templeman, stuff like that, he's really important. Was the Doobie Brothers producer at the time and produced like Van Halen, and I think he may have done like a Michael Jackson album or two, I'm not sure. Like this, at the time, it was being recorded with like the absolute best quality that was available to the music industry. And that's what makes it so good, is that all of these guys are classically trained musicians. These aren't guys like Guns N' Roses who just were kids that picked up guitars and started rocking out and like luckily found fame and stardom and stuff. Like these guys went to music school. They have degrees in music. They study their instruments. They play their instruments every day. They you know, these guys are the best musicians in the industry at the time, making music that pushes the limits of their technical ability, and recording it with the best available technology. And so it's just objectively better. I mean, like, music is not an objective thing at all. It's music tastes are very wildly, they're so subjective, but in terms of the quality of the music that's being made, like, objectively, this music was better than anything else that was coming out. And it's interesting too, because a lot of people tried to do that. A lot of people who are in the industry saw that and recognized that and said, I want to do that. I want to work with those guys. And the biggest one of those is Michael Jackson, whose album Thriller, the best-selling album of all time, which came out in like 81 or 82, almost the entire backing band is the members of Toto.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
On like most of the songs. And like like not the super famous ones off that album, like Thriller, obviously, Beat It, Billie Jean. Those aren't yacht rock songs, but almost the rest of the album is. The Girl Is Mine, with just a duet that he did with Paul McCartney, is classic Doobie bounce. It's smooth electric piano. Let's see what else. Baby Be Mine on that one. The Beyond Yacht Rock podcast guys define Human Nature as like quintessential yacht. It's one of the best yacht rock songs ever made. And it's wild to me that like somebody like Michael Jackson, who made like, some pretty poppy hits. You think about Bad, you think about Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Pretty Young Thing, stuff like that, heard this music and went, oh wait, I want to go in this smooth, like, softer direction kind of thing. That is wild to me, that these guys within the industry were recognized as being like the best of the best, and everybody wanted to try to do what they were doing and wanted to do it with them. That is wild to me. Yeah. It was just insane.
Now that I think about it, at SeaWorld they have an instrumental track that plays through the entire park that's the same songs over and over again. The only song on there that I can like point out is an instrumental version of Human Nature.
Sure.
Because it's just kind of this mellow, great kind of background sort of thing.
Right, and that's like that's actually, background is actually a really good word for like a lot of this music, because like I said, it's not innovative. It doesn't push the boundaries of music at the time. It is very much right in the pop music, like right down the road. This music was made to be like on the charts and stuff. Like they weren't trying to change the direction of music. They weren't trying to change what was popular at the time. They were just making pop music, and they did it better than anyone ever did, which is wild to me. So yeah, let's see. See if I can think of some songs. What a Fool Believes by the Doobie Brothers is the yacht rock song. If you want a definition of yacht rock, just listen to What a Fool Believes. It's written from the perspective of a sentimental fool, obviously. It's the Doobie Brothers, so of course it has Doobie Bounce. It's Michael McDonald on lead vocals and playing electric piano, I assume. It's just the perfect yacht rock song. Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald did a lot of stuff where they wrote together. So Kenny Loggins has a song called This Is It, which is another pretty classic yacht rock song that Michael McDonald co-wrote and I believe sings backing vocals on. Kenny Loggins wrote a lot of stuff like for Michael McDonald or with Michael McDonald that the Doobie Brothers recorded. Kenny Loggins wrote with the guys from Toto, like Steve Lukather and the Picaros and those guys, Walter Beckett and Donald Fagen from Steely Dan, who I haven't really talked about, but were, again, in that scene, like, they play on people's recordings a lot, drums or bass or guitar or whatever. Steve Lukather from Toto, who's their guitarist specifically, plays on a ton of yacht rock stuff. He plays on most of the songs on Thriller. He did a lot of stuff with the Doobies. He did a lot of stuff with Christopher Cross. He's all over the place. And that's like kind of how you decide whether a song is yacht rock or not, is by looking at not only the sound, but looking at the personnel that played on it. Like, it's a very important that you're part of the scene that made yacht rock. Otherwise, you're just making, like, smooth jazz or soft rock.
So that's how there's no real successor.
Right,
this.
yeah. I mean, there was a little bit in the sense of, like, when Michael McDonald joined the Doobie Brothers in the mid-'70s and Kenny Loggins broke up with Jim Messina in the mid-'70s. That was kind of at the same time. And then, like, those guys started writing music together and then went apart and started writing music with other people. And there's sort of this, like, same with Walter Beckett and Donald Fagen. Like, there was a Steely Dan, like, sort of crowd of people that, like, learned music writing from those guys. There were guys who, like, learned from Loggins and learned from Michael McDonald and learned from Toto and, like, went down the line a little bit. But when it got to, like, the mid-'80s, all those guys just stopped making that kind of music and just started doing anything. So, like, there was succession a little bit because, like, you see a lot more variation in the early to mid 80s. There are more people making yacht rock than there were in the 70s, but it's not a huge scene. It never went out, like, outside the United States, but there are kind of other things, other, like, subgenres of yacht rock, I guess, because all these guys were recording and living in Los Angeles. And that's kind of, you had to be there to record with them, and so that's why the scene never really got bigger. But, like, there is some, like, stuff that was recorded in New York, for example, which, like, comes very close to the exact same sounds and the bounce and the sentimentality and stuff like that, that doesn't have any of the personnel on it. Same thing with, like, there was some stuff recorded at Muscle Shoals that's, like soft country, but bordering on yacht rock because of how smooth it is, and again, like, got the bounce, the sentimentality, stuff like that, but had none of the personnel. Like, Christopher Cross is from Texas or something like that, but moved to Los Angeles specifically to record, like, with these people, which is interesting. And again, well, like, the other thing too is, like, Michael Jackson. Like, Michael Jackson, obviously not from Los Angeles, but, like, recorded in LA specifically to get, like, Toto and who's the guitarist that plays on Beat It? Eddie Van Halen, who was living in Los Angeles at the time.
I just always assumed because of Neverland Ranch that Michael Jackson had been associated with California for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, probably, but, like, specifically wanted to record here. I'm sure Michael Jackson probably has recording credits all over the place, but, like, specifically wanted to record in Los Angeles for, like,
these artists.
To work with these musicians. And that's another reason that the producers and production value of yacht rock is so important, because, like, those guys are the ones that brought everybody together. Those were the things that, like, yeah, Michael McDonald and Kenny Loggins knew each other because they were both famous musicians, and so they were, like, friends and wanted to work together, but, like, those guys never would have met Steely Dan or Toto or anything like that without the producers who worked with all of them you know, whoever Michael Jackson's producer for Thriller was said, hey, like, let me introduce you to Toto, we could make some music together, kind of thing, because produced both of them. Just this whole idea to me is just so interesting that there was just this scene, and there was just, like, just these guys making this music that they wanted to make, and here we are 30 years later talking about it. And, like, I'm not a person I don't think that you would say ever would listen to this kind of music if you know me and my musical tastes at all. I grew up listening to classic bordering on hard rock, Led Zeppelin, Boston,
And some earlier stuff.
yeah, but the thing is, I got into the earlier stuff later after
okay.
I sort of laid like the Led Zeppelin, the classic rock foundation. I went back and got into stuff from the 50s and 60s. But
Somehow I always thought like your musical aspirations started with the Beatles.
no, not really. It was pretty much Led Zeppelin. I mean, I'm a huge Beatles fan, don't get me wrong, but I went back to the Beatles. I went back to Elvis and Buddy Holly and Fats Domino and stuff like that, and sort of worked my way forward. But no, like I'm definitely I was a Led Zeppelin, and then I mean when I was in middle school and high school, I was much more into hard rock, so I was listening to. And like punk and stuff. I was listening to the Ramones,
Molly.
yeah, Flogging Molly, of course, my favorite band ever. Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Metallica, Iron Maiden. Like that's the kind of music that I listen to the most. And so it's sort of weird for me to be excited about this music that is literally the opposite of all of that. Like Led Zeppelin is super bluesy and a lot of really harsh drums, and like the only like electric piano ever in Led Zeppelin is like the intro to Stairway to Heaven, basically. They have some other stuff that's kind of soft too, but like that's sort of the classic one. It's like it's just guitars, drums, bass. Like that's the music that that laid the foundation for me for music. Because even the Beatles did that too. Like the Beatles were guitar, drums, bass, and there's a lot of piano, but it's like grand piano kind of thing.
All great music to drive to, by the way.
Right, sure. Of course. If we're being honest, I think any music is good music to drive to if you're listening to it.
I don't agree with classical.
Oh my god. Drive on a freeway in the middle of a highway in the middle of nowhere and listen to the 1812 Overture.
Okay, there are moments.
Yeah. Do that.
I was just thinking about being stuck in traffic listening to classical music.
Well, I don't know, like, stuck in traffic, it's hot, you're getting frustrated, like, turn on some soothing Bach or Beethoven. Oh my god, this is going way off topic, but did you hear this thing about Sony, like, the company Sony saying they owned, like, the rights to Bach's music or something like that? Did you hear about this?
No.
Oh my god, yeah, it was like, this happened like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I don't know what like triggered it, but
has to be public domain.
For some reason, Sony like implied or said outright, I don't know the details, that they owned the distribution rights or something to Bach's catalog.
Like particular recordings or
I have no idea, but like they just said Sony said we own Bach. And then,
which one would be another question.
Right. Well, I mean, the most famous one.
Yeah, of course.
And then they said, like there was like a whole bunch of outrage on the internet. This is the only reason I know this because I saw it on Reddit. They walked it back like 2 days later and were like, oh yeah, sorry, we don't actually own that. Because like you said, it's totally public domain.
Yeah.
Like the music industry didn't exist when Bach was making music.
You can make the argument, I think, though, that certain copyrights can be held on particular recordings of it. But
yeah, that's probably true. But the music industry was created so that artists could make money on it. Like a lot of those guys who were the composers, Beethoven and Bach and Handel and all those guys, like, kind of died poor because
weren't they paid like on contract?
Right.
Like, write this music.
Yeah, they were paid write this music or perform at this function, and that's how they were paid. And the way the music industry works now is that you write music and you release it, and then when people use it, you're paid for that.
Yeah, royalties.
Royalties. That system was specifically invented to prevent what happened to those artists.
Yeah.
The artists who recorded or wrote music before electricity was invented, basically. I mean, before like you had the ability to record things and play them over and over and over and over. because like you said, like Beethoven wrote things on commission. It was like somebody was like, write me a symphony, I'll pay you this much money, and he'd do it and perform it once, and then that's it, on to the next thing, right? Right. And so Beethoven wasn't constantly making money from the work that he'd already completed. He was just paid one time, and then that's it. Like, that's...
That's why one of their back catalogs are so large.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, because they had to keep... Like, Beethoven had to keep writing music till he keeled over and died, like, literally, to be able to feed himself.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, sad, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is sad, but... So yeah, like the music industry specifically was like for that, which is why it was funny when Sony was like, yeah, we own this, and everybody in the world was like, no you don't.
Yeah.
Like, we're not paying you money to use it, obviously, so like, you don't own it, because that's how we define ownership of music in today's modern music industry. Yeah, I just thought that was funny.
That is weird.
Total tangent, but...
Well, that's what this is for.
It was sort of related. I mean, it was about music. But yeah, I thought it was funny. Man. Yeah, so I've been listening to this podcast and for like 6 months and listening to...
They have that much to say on it?
No, okay, so let me talk about the podcast too, because like this is a podcast and we should plug other podcasts.
Indeed.
The only time they really talk about yacht rock was this web series that they made like 10 years ago. That like sort of laid the foundation, and all those episodes they're not like guys sitting down talking like about and defining the genre. It was like them playing these characters. So like one of the guys on the podcast played Michael McDonald, and like the couple of the guys, I think like there's 4 of them, and like 3 of them were recorded on it, I think. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. I have to go back and watch it again now that I know who these guys are, to see like how involved they really were. But I know specifically that like the guy who hosts the podcast played Michael McDonald. He's like the main character kind of. And all of the episodes of the web series are like specific stories that are totally made up, by the way, completely and totally fictional, about how these guys wrote like specific songs. So they have one episode where, they're about Michael McDonald writing What a Fool Believes, which is like the yacht rock song. They have an episode about how Jimmy Buffett tricked Kenny Loggins into writing the Footloose theme song.
Okay.
Which is, it's just brilliant comedy. It's amazing. Oh, that's the other thing, is that these guys really, really, really hate Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett is not yacht rock. And their justification for that is that...
Too on the nose?
No, soft is not smooth. That's the definition. Jimmy Buffett makes soft rock, not smooth rock. And
I can see that.
Yeah, and therefore is not yacht rock. And also, these guys really hate Jimmy Buffett for, like, no reason at all. They just don't like his music, which is, I think, is funny. I can only name, like, 2 Jimmy Buffett songs, if we're being honest. The 2 that everybody knows, Cheeseburger in Paradise and Margaritaville.
Fins?
No idea.
Oh.
I literally have never listened to Jimmy Buffett, except accidentally. But
I think I've listened to him more live than I have on the radio.
Sure. But so, like, Jimmy Buffett is, like, kind of this villain in this one story. Oh, like, Hall & Oates are, like, also villains in the story, even though Hall & Oates did some yacht rock type of stuff. I couldn't name a song specifically, but they do have some things that are sort of yacht rocky. Anyway, yeah, so that's the web series. What the podcast does is they just make up other random genres. They're not talking about yacht rock. They play a yacht rock song at the beginning of every episode because they're like, we know this is the reason you're here kind of thing, because you watched that and now that's the only reason you listen to us, which is probably untrue. I think that this Beyond Yacht Rock podcast is probably more popular than that web series ever was, but
well, everyone starts somewhere though.
Right. So and then like every, I don't know what it is, every 5th episode on the 5s or on the 10s or whatever, they do like a yacht rock episode. I think it's on the 10s where they'll do like a specific Yacht Rock episode. So they did one where they went down to Comic-Con and did a live podcast at some bar where they listened to Kenny Loggins' Celebrate Me Home album and just talked about it and like talked about Yacht Rock and stuff like that. That's where I got the definition from. That's the episode that I was listening to. That quote from Kenny Loggins at the beginning of this episode. But they just make up wacky stuff. Their first couple ones are like, they did one called Sultry Hits, which is just like sultry songs where like the person who's singing the song like wants to have sex with you, the listener, kind of thing. Or they did one called like Hard Organ, which was all about like the Hammond B3 organ, and so it was like a lot of like, it was like Deep Purple and Deep Purple disciples, because those are the only people who use organ in like hard rock. I just listened to one the other day that was it's called Easy Wiccaning. It was one of the really earlier ones, but I've been skipping around, just like clicking on titles that I think are funny. They did one called Easy Wiccaning that was really early, where it was like folk songs or like softer like acoustic kind of stuff about like Satan worship. And
what?
Yeah, like it's kind of like Hobbit rock, where they're talking about like dwarves and, you know, like witches and gypsies and stuff, but they like devil worship and stuff like that. But it's like this, if you listened to the song without comprehending what the lyrics were, you'd be like, oh wow, this is like some really like mellow kind of stuff, and they're all talking about like, you know, like performing satanic rituals and sacrificing babies and stuff like that, which is just hilarious to me. So that's what they do on the podcast, which is just really funny, because it's gotten me to listen to just a bunch of things that I would never even have heard of, never mind sought out.
It is fascinating how large the back catalog of modern music truly is. Like, I always think that I'm going to run out of 1950s songs to listen to. And maybe that's true, like, 50 years from now.
Right, yeah.
But
eventually, like, there are a finite number of songs that were written in the 50s, but it's a lot of them. And that's the thing about, like, that's the other thing about this podcast that's great about the music industry, frankly, is that back in the 50s, there were not a lot of people recording and making music. Even though, like you said, it's going to take you forever. But, like, comparatively, in successive decades, there are more and more people writing, recording, and releasing music. And that's kind of the best part about music, to me, is that it'll never stop. People are always going to do that.
Making new things, at least.
Right. Not necessarily things that were better than what came before. I mean, there's a reason we call classic rock classic. It's because it defines the genre rock and roll. There's a reason you have stations that go back to the same songs over and over and over. Stairway to Heaven, Don't Stop Believin', Bohemian Rhapsody, things like that are just these just mega popular
masterpieces.
Yeah, they really are. They're masterpieces, and people will all, like, I hear a lot. All of my friends are really into music and stuff, and you hear the term overplayed a lot. That's
hard to do.
People will say "Don't Stop Believing's" overplayed, and that just doesn't make sense to me. It cannot possibly be overplayed. It's like one of the most popular songs ever written. The reason it's played so much is because everyone likes it.
It might be overplayed in an individual day.
Maybe. But again, like the other thing about classic rock that I think is interesting, and this applies to yacht rock as well, is that the way modern radio works and has worked for a really long time is that the recording studios who own, or not recording studios, but record labels that own distribution rights to songs go to radio stations and say, hey, we have this new album coming out from this artist. Here are the singles off it. We'll pay you this much money to play them this frequently.
Wasn't that like the whole payola scandal?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. That's how the modern radio works. And that's how modern radio has always worked, frankly. I mean, that was happening back in the 70s and 80s. And so maybe back then, I could I would be on board with saying that maybe Don't Stop Believin' was overplayed, because the record company is saying to radio stations all across the world, play this song 11 times in one day, we'll pay you a lot of money. And of course radio stations are going to be like, all right, yeah, give us money, great.
Doesn't even matter if people listen.
Right, it doesn't matter because you are giving us this money, we don't care. So with that in mind, those songs are no longer current. Those songs aren't being released by record labels.
And yet they're still being played.
Radio stations choose to play them because that's what people want to hear. Those are the best songs that have ever been written. That's why they play them so much. And that's why I get mad when, not mad, but irritated when people say, like, those songs are overplayed. They're not overplayed. They're just really good and everybody wants to hear them.
I completely agree.
Like, and yeah, so that's kind of the other great thing about the music industry too, is that, like, yes, it's always evolving, it's always innovating, people are always putting out new content, but, like, we'll always have that back catalog to go back to and pick out hits and stuff like that. And that's the thing that I think I appreciate most about listening to this podcast, is that I'm just discovering new stuff.
Yeah.
Discovering new music is great for me because the way I listen to music is like going through phases of genres or even like specific bands, where I'll like only listen to that genre for months at a time.
I can see that. I did the same thing.
Earlier this year, I went through this like kind of southern rock folk revival thing that has like bands that are current, like making music now. Bands like the Revivalists and Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats.
Never heard of either.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like, I accidentally stumbled upon these bands and then was like, oh, that song's good. Let me make a Pandora station off this one song, and it introduces me to this whole other genre or catalog of music that I never would have otherwise heard. And like some of those bands I like start following, and I am going to see Nathaniel Rateliff in concert in 2 weeks. Like,
that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, like I just get into them, so I dive headfirst down the rabbit hole into music genres like that. And so like listening to this podcast where they're introducing stuff to me that I've never heard, is great, because then I can go do exactly that. I'd be like, oh, I really liked that one song that they played. It was by this band. I'm gonna put on, I'm gonna go on Spotify and listen to their artist radio, and then I learn more about that band. I learn more about other bands that sound like that band. I learn more about other bands that sound like those bands that sounded like that first band. It's crazy. That's what's great about music. It's always there, and there's so much of it.
Yeah. I actually kind of stumbled across some new music that I'll talk to you after the podcast this week that I'm rather happy about. I found a whole new genre of country music that I didn't even know existed.
Sure. So. I didn't get into country until I was in college. My mom's always been a big country fan, but I was one of those like kind of pretentious rock and roll fans who was like, country and rap are terrible. And then I say that now having Nas's Illmatic in my car in CD form, which is like the best hip-hop album ever. If you've never heard it, go listen to it immediately. It's fantastic. And Jim Croce's Photographs and Memories, which isn't necessarily country. He's more of a folk artist, but like I discovered him from listening to like country and going down that like folk roots sort of road and stuff like that.
Getting away from the pop country.
Yeah. One of my roommates in college was from Ohio and is a big country fan, and so like that's just being around him forced me to listen to country, and like I've gone to multiple country concerts with him. Like earlier this year I went to we do a thing here called Coastal Country Jam, where they do it like every couple months or once a month or something like that during spring and summer on the beach, and it was like Lady Antebellum.
Toby Keith came. right?
Yeah, Toby Keith came. I didn't go to the Toby Keith one. I went to Lady Antebellum, and it was like, who was it? Like Brett Eldridge, I think, and somebody else. Old Dominion, who was really, really good. Lady A blew me away. They were fantastic, but Old Dominion was really, really good. So yeah, like I'm starting to appreciate, like I've become. Patrick told me not to cuss, so I can't say the word I was gonna say, but I've become less pretentious and more accepting of just all kinds of music. I care way less now about what people think about my music tastes, and I care less. This is gonna sound weird, but I'll explain it. I care less about what other people's music tastes are. That sounds insensitive. It just means that I don't judge people about their music tastes, and in fact, I would rather meet somebody who doesn't have the same taste in music that I do, because that means that I'll be introduced to new music through them.
Have you met anyone that has like a specific genre and that's all they listen to? Because at least from my personal experience, I found at least a song from every single genre that I've ever heard that was good to me.
I would say that the answer to that question is sort of. Back when I was in middle school and high school,
That would make sense.
when everybody was way more self-conscious and like pretentious about the music, yeah, I knew tons of people who only listened to like Led Zeppelin style classic rock, or only listened to like Garth Brooks, Toby Keith country, or only listened to at what was modern at the time rap, which is god awful. Don't even get me started. Rap died when Biggie and Tupac died. God, I hate modern rap. Sorry.
It's okay.
I just spent this whole thing, spent the last couple minutes saying I'm so open-minded about music, and then do that to rap. No, but it's just that my rap tastes tend to skew towards things that are less about the music and more about the message, and so like the earlier rappers who were talking about like social issues, Tupac and Biggie and Nas and like early Dre and stuff like that, that's the kind of rap that I enjoy listening to, because the music is just sort of there as a background thing to this spoken word message. There are a couple modern artists that do that. Mainly Kendrick Lamar is like a really old school rapper, but Kendrick Lamar also has the advantage of being produced by Bootsy Collins, who is the bass player for Parliament Funkadelic.
Oh, okay.
And is like a real old school musician. And that comes through a lot in Kendrick's music. But Kendrick also does a lot of stuff about like he's from Compton, and so like his message is kind of about like, yo, there's still problems in the hood, there's still gang violence, there's still, you know, racism, all this stuff, and like that's the kind of rap that I like listening to.
So you're not into mumble rap?
No, God no. Are you talking about like gas pedal and stuff like that?
I don't even know what it is. I just hear the phrase thrown about. I assume it's where people mumble.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of it. It's all over. If you walk around a college campus, you'll hear it. It was all over the damn place when I was in college. Like, it was so bad. You go to any party and that's what people are playing. And like, that was the fun thing about my roommates. So like, I'm a, you know, white boy from sunny Southern California, grew up behind the orange curtain. Like, yeah, we got Hispanic people because it's Southern California, but like, I was exposed to some other cultures when I moved to Oregon to go to college. Specifically, people who listen to like a lot of rap, because none of my friends do. Like, we were so insulated. We're all like rock people, but
just for viewer information, there was a long period in high school where I refused to listen to anything but swing music.
Yeah, I remember that. It was awful. Couldn't take him anywhere. No, so when I went to college, it just like accidentally was forced to listen to a lot more rap than I had ever listened to. But like, my roommates, who were both rap fans, also thought that like a lot of the stuff that was coming out at the time was terrible. And so we would listen to like kind of some old school stuff, like 90s and early 2000s hip hop rather than like 2010 hip hop.
Yeah.
So we were listening to like, like early J-Lo and New Kids on the Block and stuff like that. Which I don't even know if they're like rap. It's kind of a aggressive title for them. They're a total boy band, but it was stuff like that. It was like the kind of the like the more fun like poppy rap songs, and then like some harder stuff when it was like people who weren't gangsters were trying to be gangster, like Gwen Stefani. Because Gwen Stefani's like the least gangster person on the earth. But like that was interesting to me because that opened up like I was like, oh wow, like I kind of actually like this sort of 90s hip hop. Oh, my phone's going off. That's so unprofessional.
As long as it doesn't get us what do you call it? Content ID'd, we're good.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you won't be able to figure out what that was through my pocket because it's definitely a copyrighted song.
We're apparently allowed to play 5 seconds of a copyrighted song. So
what's interesting about the Beyond Yacht Rock podcast, to bring this full circle, is that they play the songs during the podcast, and to avoid the copyright infringement, they have to talk over them. Yeah. That's like their qualifier. So like you can't really listen to the songs that they have, but you get an idea. I mean, you can hear it. It's turned down so you can hear them talking about it, but it's loud enough that you can tell what it is and you can hear it. And you can be like they're talking about this specific concept or this specific part of this song, and then you hear that and you go like, oh yeah, I understand what they're talking about. Which you kind of have to do when you're talking about music. Like, you can't just explain a song to somebody. Like, they will have no idea what it sounds like. You can't. It doesn't matter how eloquent you are. You cannot explain, like, it sounds like this, and they'll know what it is. You have to listen to it.
It sounds like music.
Right. You're not wrong.
Have you ever given the NPR, like, tiny desk concert thingamabob a listen?
I've seen a couple of them. They always post videos on YouTube. I've searched out specific songs. Since we were talking about me getting into country music, I'm a really big Chris Stapleton fan.
Oh, okay.
I think that guy is amazing. I think he is maybe the best thing that's come out of country music in a long time. And he was in a band called the Steel Drivers back in like the early 2000s, I want to say. Or like maybe even later than that. But like before he hit it big, Chris Stapleton was the session musician who was like worked with all these people in the Nashville sort of country scene before he became a big celebrity. So like he's been doing music for a long time. He was in a band called the Steel Drivers, and did the Tiny Desk concert for NPR and played a lot of his own stuff. With his wife, who sings a lot of background vocals on all his records. Like if you ever hear a female voice on a Chris Stapleton song, that's Chris Stapleton's wife, whose name I can't remember, but that's her. So the two of them did this Tiny Desk concert for NPR, and he played a Steel Driver song on it, and it was really, really good because the song is Steel Drivers are less country and more bluegrass because it's really acoustic. It's not upbeat like bluegrass is a lot of the time.
I've never considered bluegrass upbeat.
It can be sometimes. Like you get some fast picking banjo and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the instrumentation in the Steel Drivers is very bluegrass. It's just acoustic guitar, sometimes slide or dobro guitar, a banjo and a violin, and then Chris Stapleton's voice, which is just fantastic. And it comes through really well when it's just Chris Stapleton on guitar and vocals. Because, all that other stuff adds to the song, but it's not really necessary. It's super acoustic guitar driven because Chris Stapleton's the primary songwriter and that's his instrument. That's what he plays. So he's obviously writing music for himself. And his vocals are just so powerful that it kind of makes all the other instrumentation redundant. So when he does the NPR Tiny Desk concert, I almost said QPR, that's a soccer team. When he did the Tiny Desk concert, he played it, and it was just fantastic. So I've searched out like specific songs on Tiny Desk Concert, but I've never like given a full one a listen. That's probably my next thing.
I've always found that I personally like the Tiny Desk Concert music better than the professionally recorded stuff.
Sure, and that that goes a lot to like music taste, I think, because like the way that NPR does those, you have to take out a lot of the elements of production.
Yeah.
Right. You can't loop things unless you've got unless the artist brings like a loop station, which most of them don't.
Yeah, why would you? That's not the point.
Right. It's so acoustic driven. It's in a room that doesn't necessarily, like, the video, if you see the video of the room, doesn't necessarily lend itself to like production level or like studio level acoustics.
Much like this room.
Yeah, much like this room. And so it's you have to dial the music back a lot. I'm unsurprised that you like that. It's just really raw and personal, I think, and which is those are words that are like buzzwords kind of that are used by critics to describe music a lot, particularly Chris Stapleton. I mean, people say, like, his voice is like kind of the definition of raw. But it like those are buzzwords in music reviews and stuff, but in this sense it's true. I mean, like, it really is just like this tiny room with like maybe a couple people in it and one or two or three musicians standing and playing the bare bones of a super popular song that they've written. And like that's really cool to me, because that's what I got into playing music for, was like just to be able to sit around with a couple of my friends and play it together. I don't want to be up on a stage. I mean, it would be cool to be up on a stage in front of hundreds of people doing that. Or like, I've had the opportunity to like play in bars and stuff before. And so there's, 10, 20, 30 people there. But like, that's fun, but like, that's not why I do it. Like, I play music by myself in the garage and just sit there and like play guitar and sing to myself, because I find that fun. I like sitting around in the backyard, like we did this a while ago, sit around a fire in my backyard and just like me and a couple of my buddies who also play guitar, and just passed a guitar around and everybody played one song and then passed it. That's the kind of thing I like playing music for, and so like, and that's basically what the Tiny Desk Concert is. It's just that sort of small personal setting where you're playing the super stripped down bare bones version of a song.
Are you still playing with that group that you were playing with a few years back? And did that get you into these bars, or?
Yes and no. The first time I ever played in a bar was in college. I lived above a bar and I worked in it.
Fair enough.
Like bar backing and serving tables and stuff like that. And my buddy, the country fan, was also a guitar player, and he's like a very outgoing, sort of just like what's the word I want to say? Like exhibitionist kind of person. He always like loves being the center of attention, like always wants to show off and like
social butterfly.
Yeah, for sure. And so he was the one who was like, hey, like he went to the bar manager or something, or the owner or whoever, and was like, hey, Chris and I play guitar together like all the time upstairs. Like, can we come play? Like, let us come set up like over in a corner and play here on like a random Wednesday. And she was like, oh, haha, funny, like, yeah, whatever, like, that'll be fun to do once. And we kept doing it. Oh my god, I did it again. I know who's calling me, and I know why they're calling me, and I should probably just turn my volume down.
It's fine. As long as it's not on my front, it's an acceptable cause.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway. What was I saying? Oh, playing bars. Yeah, so we just kept doing that. Like, we did it, like, once a week, and, like, one of the guys who worked there, like, played banjo. So, like, I got into playing banjo, instead of guitar, because he, my buddy played exclusively guitar, and I so I like switched to banjo, but then sometimes I'd play guitar. And then we found another guy who played banjo. Then we found another guy who like we just knew through the bar who played violin. And so I started playing, and like we were playing like a lot of like folk and bluegrass and country and stuff like that with that sort of instrumentation. The four of us. When I moved back here, when I moved back home from college, I got back together with a bunch of my buddies who were like from high school, who we all did like the classic rock thing, but all our music tastes had changed, and so we were doing more of like a like I want to say like I guess you'd define it as like prog rock. There was like some more modern stuff. We were playing like Tame Impala and Modest Mouse and Cold War Kids, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Then that sort of, like, people started getting busy, so that died, and that band never played a show.
That's what I was most curious about.
Yeah.
Because I heard them play a couple times, like
right.
literally twice.
Yeah.
And you guys were good. You guys
right.
were good enough to be in a bar.
Yeah. It just got busy and people couldn't make it work. So then the guitarist and I left and joined another band through like a guy that he knew that was a drummer.
Those guys?
No, not those guys. I'll get into those guys actually. That's kind of where this story is going. Okay. No, we sort of joined another band through like a guy that we like peripherally knew, and then he brought in another guy, so there was four of us, and we were doing more of like an industrial rock. Like it's kind of it's heavy metal, but like not as dark. It's like the band Tool. If you know Tool, like that's the sound we were going for.
Okay.
I played a couple shows with that band. We had like a studio, like practice space in Santa Ana, and so we played like the downtown, like 4th Street Market sort of scene a couple times, which was fun. I was playing bass in that band, which I love bass. I love listening to bass. I love playing bass. It was really simple for me because like again, like I'm not the person who wants the spotlight, and no bassist has ever had the spotlight. So, that was a lot of fun. Then again, like people got busy and stuff like that, so that sort of fell apart. While I was doing that, some other friends of ours have had a band for years and years and years, since high school basically, that never really fell apart, and they became the house band at a bar, and that's those guys. And
you can say the name of the bar if you wish.
Okay, I won't. They're sort of the house band at this bar, but they play like a lot of weddings, and they play other bars too and stuff like that. And they play like at casinos a couple times.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, they've done that a few times. I don't actually play with them. I sing for them. Okay. Which is weird for me because I've never been comfortable as a singer, but I also know that I've become a much better singer over the years because I got into playing music, and I play for myself, and so I'm like play by myself, and I'm sitting there singing, and like it's a muscle like anything else. You work it out enough, it'll get stronger. So I do karaoke a lot now.
You're quite good at it.
Thank you. And so like that, like I practice singing. That's what I do in the car. Like I if I'm in the car to and from work, it's a 45-minute commute. I'm sitting there listening to music and singing along to it and trying. I specifically seek out songs to push my upper and lower limits, so that I can stretch those and like be
That's
a
really
better
cool.
singer. Yeah. So I sing for those guys occasionally. It started out just being like a song or two, because like we were friends of the band, so we'd go to the bar and just like see them, and then my buddy Chase, who is the lead singer, was like just randomly was like, Chris, come sing with me. And I was like, I have no idea what song they're about to play, and he wants me to sing it. They play they play basically all classic rock covers, so you know, I had it was pretty good guess that I was going to be able to know the song. So I've done that we did that a couple times with them, singing all sorts of different stuff, but all songs that I knew. I've gotten to the point with them now where like if one of them is sick and can't make it, or like this happened a couple weeks ago, Chase just like really bad like throat infection or something, called me the day of the show and said, hey man, I can't sing, can you cover for me? So I went and sang. They have two singers, they have two lead singers in that band, so I only have to sing like half the set, but yeah, I cover for them as sort of like a semi-permanent singer. Like I'm the first call when they need somebody.
That's pretty cool.
Which is sweet. We still do the thing where like we call people up for like one song at a time. We've like got a pretty solid group of regulars that all go to this bar, all go to karaoke, are all friends, are all good singers, are all knowledgeable about music. Like those type of people just tend to attract other of those type of people. So like we'll call people up for one-offs. We know a guy who does a fantastic Sinatra impression, so we get him to sing Neil Diamond, because that's what you do with a Sinatra impersonator. Sweet Carol. Everybody in the world knows Sweet Caroline. Love it or hate it. I hate it, but
I actually would have never thought that.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm just annoyed with it. Mostly because the Red Sox keep beating the Angels in the playoffs for like the last decade.
What does that have to do with anything?
Because the Red Sox sing Sweet Caroline during the 7th inning stretch at every home game.
Oh.
They do this. They're the ones who invented the Sweet Caroline, but. That's not in the song. The Red Sox invented singing that.
Seriously?
Yeah, the Red Sox fans invented singing that, and I hate the Red Sox, so I hate Sweet Caroline. That's that logic train.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but yeah, so we make our Sinatra impersonator. He sings Sinatra at karaoke, and it's great. He sang Come Fly With Me one time. It's the first time I ever heard him. It's my favorite Sinatra song, and I almost cried. It was so good. Anyway, we don't know how to play any Sinatra songs because they're like kind of too big bandy, big horn section and stuff, like strings and stuff. But we could play Neil Diamond, so we have him sing like Sweet Caroline. We've got another guy who does like some pretty modern hip hop and does like we get him to sing like Bruno Mars songs and stuff. We've got some other guys who are like more of hard rock kind of singers. So if we do like Guns N' Roses, we actually know a guy, our buddy Bradley, who was in a Guns N' Roses, not just like a cover band, but like an impersonation band. Like they dressed up.
Do they call that a tribute band?
I guess, yeah. I guess you could call it a tribute band. Where they dressed up like the members of Guns N' Roses that they were like supposed to be. Like guitar player dressed up like Slash. And our buddy Bradley was the lead singer, so he dressed up like Axl Rose. Wow. And so like you get him on stage and sing like Welcome to the Jungle or something like that, and it sounds dead on. Like it sounds like Guns N' Roses. It's amazing. So we still do that on like a song by song basis sometimes. But yeah, I've gotten to the point where I'm sort of the substitute singer, and I play in a bar like I mean they play there once a month.
I thought they played far more often than that.
Well, they play there once a month.
Okay.
And then on like the big holiday, they're as much the house band as anybody else is, so they play on all the big holidays, like all the big drinking holidays, 4th of July, New Year's, Cinco de Mayo.
October.
Yeah, exactly. Oktoberfest, the entirety of September and October. They play Halloween every year, yeah, like that's a big one. So yeah, I've been doing that, that's fun. But I prefer just to sit around with a couple people and just jam and talk about music, and I've amassed sort of a collection of like unconventional percussion instruments that are just sitting at my house that like anybody can pick up and play along with. So like I have a single bongo, like not a pair of bongos like the bongos are meant to be played. I have a single bongo. I have there's a thing called a Latin shaker, which I can't really describe it if you don't know what it is, but it's basically like a hollow cylinder that's like sort of filled with sand, and you just shake it like this. And I know you can't see what I'm doing, but you just shake it, and it sounds like it's supposed to sound like a sort of a hi-hat type of sound on a drum, okay. I can't even do the sound with my mouth, but it's surprising convincing. If you didn't know that that's what you were listening to, you would think it was like actually a drummer sitting in a drum kit playing it. I've got like a cowbell and a wood block. And I just bought a kazoo on Amazon the other day because the kazoo is an amazing instrument that anyone in the world can play. If you can hum, you can play a kazoo.
It's true.
So that's great.
You're becoming a bit like Critical.
Yeah.
Critical has a odd instrument collection.
Sure. Oh, well, I mean, that's the other thing is too, like now when I started playing guitar was sort of like open the floodgates to all these instruments. I'm a classically trained saxophone player. That was my first instrument. I got into guitar when I was 11 because I thought guitar was cool and like I was going to get chicks and stuff.
Well, it is cool, but...
And that totally didn't happen. But because of that, I now play banjo and ukulele and anything with strings, more or less, that's not called a violin. Like, that's the only stringed instrument I don't know how to play. I taught myself how to play piano. I taught myself how to play harmonica. I taught myself how to play trumpet.
Wow.
So I've quite the collection of musical instruments in my house. They're all over the place. They're just laying around. People can pick them up and play them. I don't care. The other thing is, like, nothing I have is, like, super expensive or nice. Like, I get all of my instruments secondhand. The nicest thing I own is my ukulele, and I didn't even buy it. It was given to me as a present. My guitar, my acoustic guitar is the same acoustic guitar that my dad bought for me when I was 11 for, like, Christmas or my birthday or something. It's the same guitar. It's been 15 years.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've never owned another acoustic guitar. That's not true. I have a 12-string guitar that I bought used off eBay. I have my first electric guitar was also given to me as a present that my then girlfriend bought from a pawn shop. The nicer guitar that I have an SG, a legit Gibson SG. I bought from my friend that I played in a band with for $100, and it's worth a lot more than that. My bass guitar I bought really cheaply somewhere, and it's like a knockoff brand. I bought an acoustic bass. I bought an acoustic bass, also off eBay that had like, it has like a chip on the headstock. So, like, the guy was selling it at, like, a super discounted price. It's, like, an $800 guitar, and I bought it for, like, maybe $150. Because of the he was, like, the damage that was done to it, and he's, like, apparently was one of those guys who, like, you know, is a collector and so knows that damage makes it worth a lot less, but I was like, I would have paid way more for it, but anyway. I've just got, like, this eclectic collection of instruments around, and, like, I didn't buy any of them super high quality or even new. So people can just pick them up. I don't care. They're not valuable. I can get another one.
So have you done any recording?
Yeah. Yes. A big outlet for me when I was in college was writing music. That was what I did. I went to college in Oregon. It rains there a lot. You can't go outside. It sucks. Especially being from sunny Southern California. I sat in my apartment and wrote a lot of music. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of notebooks that are poems or lyrics or chord progressions, stuff like that, that I just like can put together into songs. I've recorded a few things, but only recently did I invest in equipment that would let me make like high quality recordings, like a microphone. I have like recordings on my phone that are like the cheap whatever like default voice memo app, which is like literally the worst possible thing you can record on. But
it's better than some things.
I just wanted to get it down because I had an idea. I probably have. I want to say 10 or so songs that I feel like are complete songs where I was able to record multiple tracks, layer them together with a editing software into a microphone that I feel is of sufficient quality in a room that had passable, at least, acoustics for me. those are complete songs that I edited after, that I played around with levels and panning things left and right, and compressing and all that stuff. That's another thing that I've been learning about a lot recently from another podcast that I was listening to that's done by a guy who's like has a degree in audio engineering, and I was like, I'm just learning a bunch of stuff about audio engineering, which is a way bigger part of recording than I would have ever expected. Like, that sounds kind of stupid to say, but I literally thought the way music was made was like just like 4 guys go in a studio and all play their instruments at the same time because they practiced the song over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and then they got it down perfectly, and they all just play it, and it magically gets recorded somehow, and then that's how it sounds on the CD. That's not the way music is made at all. And
I'm not gonna lie, I thought that some albums were done that way.
Well, yeah, so really early on recordings of music were actually made that way. I mean, that was the only, because they didn't have like 8 tracks and like, multi-layering and stuff like that. That technology didn't exist yet. As soon as that was invented, it pretty much doesn't do that anymore. There are some bands who go in and do like everybody playing at the same time. Those tend to be bands who are trying to make the sound more live,
more gritty and realistic.
Right. Metallica is actually famous for this when they did their self-titled album, also known as the Black Album. It's the one that's got Enter Sandman on it. They used the same recording studio that they had used for their previous album, but they put plywood on the walls and the floor to make the sound bounce more, to make it sound like they were playing in like an arena or in a stadium or something, because it sounds more live. And so a lot of that was them all being in the recording studio at the same time together and playing the music at the same time together, so that the sound waves would bounce the same way they would bounce when they're playing it live.
That's pretty cool.
Flogging Molly is another band that does that, and they're a live band. Flogging Molly's first album was a live album. Like, they didn't have a studio recording that people listened to and then made them want to go to their concert, and then they recorded that. Their first album is called Alive Behind the Green Door, and it's a live album. And they are another band who, like, everybody in the studio at the same time, playing into, multiple recording devices, obviously, but, like, they're all playing together and they can all hear each other playing, because they want the sound to be live. So some bands do that.
But it's just not common.
It's just not, I wouldn't say it's common, it's just not like, it's not the overwhelming, it's not the way that the majority of music is made.
Okay.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's uncommon, but it's just not it's not really the standard now. It's also way easier to record one at a time.
Yeah.
Because you have somebody on a metronome, like the drummer on a metronome, just laying down a beat or whatever. You bring in the bassist and go, okay, listen to what the drummer did. Now play the bass line down so that he's playing along with that beat. Then you bring the guitar player in and say, here's the rhythm section, play guitar over it. Then you bring the singer in, and the whole song is complete. You just be like, all right, here's all these parts, here's where the breaks are, sing the words that you wrote or that somebody else wrote, because that's another thing that happens in music a lot, is like ghostwriting. There are people writing songs for other people. I don't have a problem. I don't have as much of a problem with that as I used to. And part of that is because of, full circle, yacht rock. Because all these guys wrote for each other and played for each other and stuff like that. And it was like, Kenny Loggins was like, hey, I wrote this song. I don't really think it's right for me, but here, you have it, Michael McDonald, or you have it, Toto, or you have it, Michael Jackson. Like, I have less of a problem with that, I guess, now than I used to. I was always like a, I was so like, you have to write your own songs, and if you don't write your own songs, you're a pretender. You're not a real musician. You're just the puppet or whatever. Cause you're a pretty face, Beyonce. Did I say that out loud? Beyonce doesn't write her own music. Sorry. Anyway. But
Fair
then,
enough.
like, now I'm finding out that happened a lot, especially back in the day.
Yeah.
Elton John didn't write any of his songs, or very few of them.
Since the 50s, it's been a thing.
Yeah.
Probably earlier.
And I didn't know that. I just assumed that, like, people wrote their own stuff. I guess I just didn't know that. But now I'm discovering, like, there are, like, some really prolific, like, people who are professional songwriters. Like, they don't record anything. They're not famous, but, like, they write, like, super mega hits. There's a guy named Jim Steinman who wrote, like, all of Meatloaf's catalog. Meatloaf literally didn't write any of the words or music. All he did was have the voice of an angel and sing and, like, be a pretty face.
There were a few, though, that did the transition. Like,
sure.
Oh, God. I think Mike Posner?
Posner, yeah.
Posner is one of them. But then there's a really famous woman from, like, the 60s and 70s.
There are a few.
I want to say, like, Joplin? Janis Joplin?
Sure.
Used to be a writer for music and then transferred over.
Right. Well, that's the other thing about, like, not just the songwriters, but the studio musicians, too. Chris Stapleton started out as a studio musician and now is, like, this ultra mega famous country star. And it's because, like, you know, he sort of, like, put in the work and then, like, the recording studio was, like, okay, fine, we'll let you, like, record your own stuff. And, like, the record label was like, okay, fine, like, we'll give you a record contract for writing all this other crap for us over the years. Toto, again, like, one of those bands where all those guys were just session musicians, and then they were like, we should write our own stuff and release it under our name and be a ultra mega famous band that wrote the best song that's ever been written about Africa, even though it has nothing to do with Africa.
I literally know the chorus.
Yeah, everyone does. Toto 4, Pure Yacht, so good. That's the last song. And the first song on there is a song called Rosanna, which is also great, great, great yacht rock song. That if you're I actually have a friend who's a huge, huge Toto fan, which I think is really funny because I'm just like, how? Of all the music from that era, like, why does Toto stand out? And they don't, but, like, also they're really good. And I'm, like, getting more into Toto, so I can't really hate on it, but I'm just like, how did Toto, no one's favorite band is Toto. But apparently it's hers, so I'll give it to her.
Well, I kind of think that's a good place to wrap up.
We went a lot longer than I thought we would.
Yeah, I was actually really, really impressed with you.
Nice Tower Records shirt, by the way. Tower Records doesn't exist anymore, and that's sad.
Yeah, behind that piano over there is a Tower Records classical music section sign.
Cool.
I took it out of a Tower Records store as they were going out of business.
When they were closing?
Yeah.
Man, I miss Tower. That building is still there, the old Tower Records on, like, Newport Boulevard, still there. I don't think there's anything in there. I think it's just, like, still the empty shell of a Tower Records.
So, I know there's a Tower Record building, because there's multiple around the country. There's definitely one near LA that still has the recording studio in the basement. That's, like, a big deal, because they're always talking about whether they're going to restore that or not. But anyway.
That would be sweet.
Thank you for joining us, listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Have a nice night, and see you out there.